Hi, it's that time of week to talk about WandaVision again. It's Friday and episode 8 just dropped, so I am going to discuss it and summarize it and give some thoughts on it. A lot of things were revealed and explained in this episode, which is good because this show is almost over and there's a lot of questions. Um, so this episode picks up from the last one with Wanda. We don't see what happened to Vision and Darcy or Monica and Pietro. The whole show, they're not on there. Well, I mean, Vision's on there in like flashbacks, but none of those other characters appear, and none of those 4 characters appear in the present story. So it's all kind of taking place in Wanda's basement, where Agatha Harkness has this base going on. That's kind of dark and witchy, and she's kind of a nut. I mean, she's like kind of I don't want to say she's raving, but she's on an ego trip, man. And the story begins. This episode begins with a flashback to 1693, Salem, Massachusetts, and so you have Agatha Harkness being tied to a stake and looking like she's going to be tortured by some people, all women in hoods and cloaks. And you quickly realize that that's kind of a bait and switch, that they're not torturing her for being a witch because they're against witches. They're all witches themselves, and they actually are trying to punish her for abusing her magic. So they all kind of attack her, and they project these kind of blue shafts of light at her. And then she kind of reverses it and sends her power out, and it's kind of purpley light, and kills all of the witches except one. And the makeup effects are good. They look really, they turn zombie corpse-like looking and die. But like zombies, they're dead. So Agatha faces off with the leader of the witches, who turns out to be her own mother, and they go at it again with the same thing. And once again, Agatha reduces this witch, her mom, to a desiccated corpse. So flash forward, and we're back in, like I said, we're back in the basement here with Agatha and Wanda, and Agatha is, kind of displaying her magic, and Wanda's attacking her to no avail. She has no power over her, and Agatha's basically just toying with her, levitating her and mocking her, doing magic tricks. No, she does do like transmutation of an animal, an insect into a bird, into a rabbit. She's part of the time petting this rabbit, which is kind of evocative of the comic book Agatha Harkness, who was always petting a cat. So, kind of like Dr. Evil or whatever. So, essentially, what Agatha's going to do is show Wanda kind of her life and go through the steps that brought her to where she is now. And this is going to explain basically why Agatha has sought her out and why she is manipulating her within the scenario Wanda created in Westview, of the kind of idyllic sitcom world. So she kind of like shows her all these things from the past. She shows her when they're children in Sokovia, her and Pietro, and for some reason little Pietro has brown hair and little Wanda has dark brown hair. So I don't know if they changed when their powers manifested or something, but kind of reminded me of Michael Fassbender being Magneto. I never understood why he didn't have silver hair, because Magneto didn't have silver hair because he was old like Ian McKellen. He had silver hair because he had silver hair, and just one more little mark that he was different, that he was a mutant. But some reason he has he's a brunette in those last few X-Men movies. So less said about those, the better. So we kind of see in Sokovia that Wanda and Pietro had kind of an average life. They weren't like dirt poor. They weren't like peasants like I was imagining, and they weren't like gypsies like in the comics or any of that stuff. They even changed the first name of Wanda's, uh, father from Django Maximoff to Oleg, and I'm not sure if they thought Django was just going to be too evocative of Quentin Tarantino's movie because, or nobody knows the original apparently beyond us, fanatics. Um, which I think is silly. But it's sort of my theory as to why they changed it. I can't really think of any other reason. Because they're always trying to like scale things down and make them more grounded. Marvel's done this in the movies, and especially less so in the recent movies, and especially in the Netflix shows. But sometimes they take it a little too far. It's kind of silly. But anyway, what we find out in this episode is that Oleg, the dad, has bought or smuggled or collected whatever a huge chest of DVDs, and they're like Bewitched, I Love Lucy, Malcolm in the Middle, basically sitcoms throughout the years. And the one the family chooses to watch is the Dick Van Dyke Show, and Wanda seems particularly enamored of Mary Tyler Moore. So this is kind of where you get the seed of her sitcom world. She's a non-American seeing American ideal in these shows. Now, I'm not really sure why these four Sokovians like these shows so much. I mean, I'm not really sure how they relate to it, or I don't know if they look at it ironically and kind of make fun of it, but I don't really think so. It's not like Mystery Science Theater, but um, they seem to just take it at face value and has some kind of sway over them. Um, it's a kind of I don't know, maybe a dubious plot point, but that's all they could come up with as to why Wanda had all these images of the television America embedded in her mind. So it kind of makes sense. I mean, they had to explain it somehow, really, as to why her subconscious worked the way it did when she manifested the hex. So, naturally the Maximoffs get bombed, and one of the missiles that lands in their house says Stark Industries. So now we know, or we already knew, but I mean this is kind of drives home through the flashback why the twins hated Tony Stark so much. And the bomb doesn't go off though, even though it's in their living room, what's left of their house. The kids survive, the parents die, and the missile misfires, malfunctions, and Agatha pretty much tells Wanda that that you did this. Didn't you do this with your power? And Wanda thinks, no, it just the missile conked out. But yeah, I mean it's pretty obvious that Wanda has somehow made that happen. So she goes through kind of onward down memory lane into she's going through kind of like these doors that Agatha's leading her through. That's the way they're visualizing this scenario. And Wanda's kind of looking in at herself in the past. So the next little vignette is Wanda at the Hydra headquarters where her and Pietro ended up and were seemingly experimented upon, which made them enhanced humans. And of course, Wanda had a connection with the stone that's in the spear from the first Avengers movie. And you're gonna hate me. I know Vision had the Mind Stone, but I'm having trouble remembering which stone it was. I know it wasn't Time because that was Doctor Strange. I don't think it was Reality. So help me out here. I can't remember, but anyway, the glowing blue stone, which was in the Tesseract, and I believe it's the same stone that was in the Cosmic Cube, though they don't call it the Cosmic Cube in the movies, but the cube held the Tesseract when the Red Skull had it in the 1940s. So yeah, that real powerful one that Loki had with the spear, and it kind of Wanda's in the room where they've been kind of experimenting on her and studying her, and she kind of bonds with the stone, and kind of like a big flash of light, and the people monitoring her, I guess, are Baron Strucker's men. They don't really know what happened, but she has a vision, pardon the pun, in that moment. And the vision is of a kind of a floating woman who don't see her face, but her outfit, including her headpiece, is extremely similar to the Scarlet Witch in the comics. It was Wanda herself. So um, I immediately thought that she's getting a vision of an earlier Scarlet Witch that's going to be like her destiny to become the next one. Because I understand in the latest Marvel comics, they've completely retconned the whole origin again to where Pietro and Wanda are not the children of Magneto. But Wanda's also, I think Wanda's mother is a descendant of these witches, and so that's why she has the witch power. So I think they've added that aspect in from the more recent comic books. Um, I mean, they don't indicate that Wanda's mother in Sokovia has any kind of magic, but I mean, I don't know, the earlier Scarlet Witch could have been a direct ancestor or just kind of a spiritual ancestor, and she inherited the mantle of her power. As time goes on, it turns out my theory was right. Basically, Agatha is trying to find out how Wanda was able to do this, to rearrange reality on this massive scale, because she wants to tap into that power, obviously, and exploit it herself. And she's kind of nudging Wanda to admit that she's a witch. Wanda doesn't really know her true nature or the true extent of her powers or why, and how she was able to create the new reality inside the hex. So we jump into another flashback that takes place at the Avengers compound, and I guess it takes place between Age of Ultron and Captain America: Civil War. And Vision visits her in her room, and they kind of bond. And it seems like this is one of the earliest times they bond. Vision is actually smiling a little bit, which he's not really known for that, teeth and all, and or synthetic teeth. And Wanda is lonely, and they're kind of starting to build into the point of this as Wanda being this kind of tragic figure, and which they did kind of make her in later years in the comic. And of course, the Vision kind of was a tragic figure himself until Wanda's love kind of gave his life a little more meaning besides being an Avenger, and because he wasn't human and he felt kind of alone, which actually in this flashback the Vision expresses that. And they're basically two alone people, but the difference is, Vision says he's never had anyone to love, so therefore he's never endured the loss of love. Good point, Vision. So that's kind of touching, and then you kind of realize Agatha is kind of when we swing back to Agatha and Wanda, Agatha is kind of throwing this in front of her, that Vision was her, her great love, her last hope, that she'd lost everything, and that she lost him, and that she wanted him back. So the next kind of flashback that Wanda sees of her own past is more recent, and she goes into the Sword headquarters and to find Vision's body. She wants to bury it. She, considers him like her husband, and she's the next of kin. She should be able to bury her husband with dignity, like he was a real person, which of course we know he was, in important ways. So she ends up getting an audience with this Hayward guy, the director of Sword, who we've already met, unfortunately, in the other episodes. He's kind of a prick. And he's an even bigger prick in this. And turns out that he lied to Darcy and Monica and Jimmy Woo. He said that Wanda stormed into the facility and took Vision's disassembled body. Um, and they're showed on video. You know, they don't really show her exactly scooping it up, but this is kind of what they do. So I don't know if he faked some of the video or just the video. He just showed what he wanted to of what really happened of her walking through the halls and whatever. We see what really happened. And she does, Hayward takes her to see the vision, and basically we see this grisly tableau that I've referred to a few times, which is directly from a really horrible John Byrne issue of West Coast Avengers, where he essentially does the same thing. You know, the government or some peacekeeping, you know, authoritarian organization captures the vision and they just disassemble him, and he's kind of reduced to his robotic parts, even though in the comic book he has more synthetic flesh and things. Like, for instance, he's anatomically, you know, correct in his genitals. In this, it looks like he's pretty much all mechanical. You know, his fleshy shell, you know, his skin and everything seem a little fleshy, but they're more like they're synthetic. So it's really maybe not that different. It's just he seems less like a human than the Vision in the comics, especially if you went by the original origin, where Vision was the remade android original Human Torch, who looked totally human. So, but Vision in this sword facility, it's pretty gross. I mean, it's tragic. I mean, it brought back bad memories of that horrible comic book, because John Byrne ended the Vision Scarlet Witch marriage. And when they reassembled Vision, he looked different. He was all kind of light yellow, and he was kind of emotionless. Stayed that way for a number of years, and eventually got his old look back and somewhat of his old self, though they never really went anywhere anymore with Vision and Wanda. They were just like fighting together in the Avengers. So, I mean, I probably missed some issues, but as far as I remember in that Kurt Busiek run, when George Perez run in the late 1990s, there was never really any closure to this. And when Brian Michael Bendis took over Avengers and was ordered to kind of wrap up the Avengers title and relaunch it so it could kind of be a big money-making franchise like the X-Men, which all that happened. In that one, you know, Wanda loses her mind. She realizes her children never existed, and she kills a bunch of people, including some Avengers, Hawkeye, and she's kind of responsible for Hawkeye dying, and I think Ant-Man and the Vision. Of course, they undo all that later, but you know, whatever. The Vision, it makes sense how they could undo that, but of course, somehow Hawkeye and Ant-Man survive. So we see what really happened in the sword facility, and she does burst into the lab where they've got, you know, Vision and all his parts, and they, you know, pull guns on her, predictably, of course. And it doesn't happen the way Hayward said in the previous episodes. Like I said, he lied to Monica and company. Wanda does not take the body. She kind of says this tearful goodbye to it, and she leaves, and she drives home. Well, you think she's driving home, wherever she's going, wherever she lives. So she has a burgundy car, of course. She drives to Westview. So here's where we get another explanation of things, though we didn't really have any kind of foreshadowing of this, but so a little plot twist is that apparently Vision, while he was living, bought the house in Westview for them. And both their names are on the deed. And I'm assuming, since Vision probably isn't a legal being, he was able to get his name on the document and afford the house, probably because of Tony Stark's largesse. That's just my theory. So I think it probably was purchased between Captain America Civil War and Avengers Infinity War. And Vision has gotten it ready, and well, he bought the property. He's going to build a house on it. And I'm assuming he's trying to eventually, you know, when he does these rendezvous with Wanda, because Wanda's kind of one of the outlaw Avengers, and Vision's kind of hanging with Tony because the rest of the Avengers are disbanded. Um, I guess he's kind of leading up to this as being some kind of surprise for her or whatever. So who knows why now? However many years later, I guess in the movie times, it's been like 6 years, maybe 2016 to 2022. So it's been about 6 years or so since Vision, I guess, purchased this house, this deed for this land to build a house. So she drives out there, and she's thing is, someone left her a letter with the deed in her car. So it's all kind of vague, and how this happened. But like I said, I think uh, ultimately Tony Stark helped out. But the thing is, like I said, I don't understand why it took 7 years. I don't understand how the note ended up in her car, the deed. But inside of the car is like the floor plans, and Wanda, um, she kind of loses it. This is kind of the moment where she's so overwhelmed with like sorrow and loneliness and everything, and her powers kind of explode out of her, and it builds the house. It looks kind of like a sitcom thing inside. Um, it's so powerful. It emanates through the town. This is how the hex starts, and it's so powerful that now we know this for sure. She recreates the vision, and what they end up with is essentially where we were at with WandaVision episode 1. Them in the black and white 50s reality, Wanda and Vision. The effects are really cool, and it's interesting because so now we know that the Vision for both of these last two scenes, we know that the Vision, who's been in our story and in the show, uh, is not in any way the Vision that we knew. I mean, he may act like him and think he is him, but he's not. He's reassembled reality. He's kind of like a reborn, but he's not the same body or any of that, because the body was never stolen. And here we see Wanda creating him. So they settle into this life, and thus begins our series. And meanwhile, in the present day, Wanda finds her two children, Billy and Tommy, and they are captured by Agatha. Agatha's got a really cool, she's levitating, has a really cool, elaborate outfit, which is pretty damn similar to the Agatha Harkness in the comics. The main difference in her look is she doesn't have white hair. She doesn't look older. But yeah, they're getting her a little closer to the comics. Instead of teaching Wanda magic like in the comics, she's kind of shepherding Wanda into realizing her potential as the witch. And she tells her that what she did was create reality out of nothingness, and it was through chaos magic, which is a reference to when she was referred to having that in the comics. And she basically says, basically you're going to realize your potential or your destiny, or I forgot exactly what she says, as the Scarlet Witch. So now we have a name for Wanda going forward, the comic book, famous pseudonym. But we also have a name probably for the character that visited her in her vision, pardon the pun again, while she was communing with the Infinity Stone. So yeah, so a lot of things make more sense now, and at least to me. There is an after the credits sequence or a middle of the credits, and that's when we get back to this slimeball Hayward. And he's been kind of hinting there's a weapon he's going to unleash on Westview to kind of finish things with Wanda off, tie it up. So we find out what the weapon is. So spoilers. I'm sure you've seen the episode, but if you haven't seen the episode and you've somehow decided to get through all these spoilers, this is like the biggest one. For me, it was the biggest one. Kind of twist, one I didn't see coming at all. And that is that the weapon that Sword has created to take care of this problem is the Vision himself. And they have rebuilt him, and Hayward remarks that they tried all different things to get him functional, but somehow they got a. And I'm not really sure how this happened, but he got some residue of Wanda's, I guess, chaos magic hex energy, and that was derived from the Infinity Stone. So it goes into the Vision, and so maybe the Mind Stone was the stone all along that Loki had. Maybe that was the name of it. I was getting mixed up. So yeah, the Mind Stone unleashed more of her powers and have made her see this vision, which she had forgotten until Agatha showed her. And it also, helped bring Vision to life. Ultron used the power of the spear and the Mind Stone, and so this kind of it's kind of like Captain Marvel, where you have a character who's received their power secondhand from one of the Infinity Stones. Like they're not using the Infinity Stones like, say, Thanos, whatever, and they're actually like the effect of the stone is making them more powerful, and that's what happened to Captain Marvel. Carol Danvers in that film. Um, so essentially, we've got the same kind of scenario here, and I'm flipping through a couple of things here just to get a little backup info. Um, we have the same thing essentially. Like Wanda, I gather that Wanda's not a mutant per se, and there's still no mutants in the Marvel universe. Most people theorize that's what was going to be the big reveal. So the real big reveal is that she's the inheritor of this kind of reality bending power, the Scarlet Witch, and that the Mind Stone spurred it to really go to the next level. And then when she kind of explodes in anguish in the property that Vision purchased for them, uh, more of the power comes out and it goes to another level. And that's what Agatha was trying to figure out was how did it happen? And I'm probably pretty sure Agatha means how did it happen and how can I control it? In other words, I'm giving you this destiny, the Scarlet Witch, and now telling you how you got all this power. So what's in it for Agatha? Well, does Agatha want to teach her how to use her power like in the comic books? Maybe, but I don't think she has any benevolent motives. Agatha seems thoroughly evil. I mean, she's a bit campy, but I think that's Catherine Hahn's portrayal, and that's kind of what they're going for. They're kind of almost going for this kind of witch-like character, like you saw in Bewitched. Some of her family, like Endora, and they're these kind of eccentric, joke-cracking witches, and whimsical and sarcastic. And that's kind of, to me, it seems like what the inspiration is, or that's how she comes off. Because I don't know much about Catherine Hahn. On my Facebook feed, people have been raving about her for the last two episodes and how basically she's the be all end all of this whole thing. I don't agree at all. I think she's the weakest actor by far in the whole show. I think she was a comedian before this. I don't know if she was a dramatic actor, but again, I haven't researched her yet. I get the feeling she was a comedian. She's very comedic. She rarely, except in the scene of the flashback 1693, she never acts serious in this character. She's still menacing at the end of episode 8 as she's got the children. So I don't know how she's going to act in the next one, but essentially, I don't think Catherine Hahn is this iconic performance or character as Agatha Harkness. I mean, I think it's interesting. I think it's cool because it is kind of a weird, crazy quilt mosaic adaptation of the comic books, which all the Marvel MCU movies are and shows are at their best. They kind of take pieces here and there and like kind of create this new thing. So, but anyway, she's pretty good in it. I was just surprised at the internet and the Twitter and Facebook obsession with her, and almost to the point where they see her as the main character now, and the one they like the best, or sympathize with the best, or idolize. Uh, I don't feel that way. I feel as though her character is very evil, manipulative, and is hurting Wanda. I think she is helping her realize her potential, but I don't think she's doing it for Wanda for anything good, And she's just kind of manipulating her and using her loneliness that came out in the hex. She's using the hex as a way to gain more power for herself. And so she embedded herself into the sitcom world, and Wanda was never able to read her mind. And she also brought in the faux Pietro, and they do mention that in some exposition. The real Pietro is dead, and that she grabbed this guy, and he's like an imposter. Though they don't really go into detail about how he got the speed power. I'm assuming that's something that Agatha gave him, or it was an illusion. I don't know. But I'm assuming we'll see Evan Peters again in the next episode, since he was at the end of the prior one, and they'll explain it a little further. Maybe. There's a lot more to explain in the last episode, but they did tie together an enormous amount of threads in this one. So what are some other thoughts? The Vision at the end, he's kind of like, he's not red and green and gold. He doesn't have like reddish purple skin and green outfit. He's kind of like, he has a similar design, but he's like pure white. And it is kind of an homage, I think, directly to the white yellow Vision that appeared in the comics after he was reassembled, after he had been taken apart. So this is the real Vision in the sense that they have put his body back together, and he's become animated by the residual power of Wanda's magic. So Vision is alive again, but we don't know if he's evil, good, what state his mind is in, if they programmed him to be evil. If they're going to use him as a weapon, I kind of feel like maybe they've reprogrammed his brain, which is what they did in the comics, except he didn't turn evil. He just turned into kind of a cold asshole and ignored Wanda. So that might be what's happening here. I mean, they're maybe just kind of going beat by beat from that storyline. I want to say I'm real happy with the way they've merged. I've said this before, but the way they've merged all these storylines from the two Vision Scarlet Witch miniseries in the 80s to the recent Scarlet Witch series, the recent Vision series, the West Coast Avengers run, and of course, way back into the classic Avengers. And they've taken all these elements from all of these things and put them together, and not just with Wanda and Vision, but also the way they've woven in Monica Rambeau too. So kudos to the writers and the director; they're great. And so yeah, I mean, when I was watching it, I was feeling weird and kind of disappointed, and kind of like, oh no, it's all about Agatha again, and then I was kind of like, I don't know, it kind of got depressing because it reminded me of those tragic things in the comics, but they make it blatant. Wanda is a tragic figure. She's like I don't know if she's anti-heroine per se, really. She's really like a heroine, but she's got a lot of facets. She definitely has a bad temper, but she's been hurt a lot. She was angry about her parents. She was angry about her brother. She was angry about Vision. And so when her power is unleashed through all that grief, and she calls it Agatha Harkness calls it a probability hex, which was the name of her mutant power in the comics. And of course, they'd already called it the hex, and short for hexagon. There were hexagonal shapes everywhere. But hex is all a pun. But so when she unleashed the power of the hex, she was finally happy again. And that's all she really wanted, was Vision back and a life and a family, a life that would emulate these hokey comedy shows that she watched. No slam. I like some of those shows. I love Bewitched and I Do Regina, for instance. I hate Malcolm in the Middle, but that was her deep down fantasy, I guess, of being an American wife, and that was her role model, was probably that Mary Tyler Moore character in Dick Van Dyke Show. So Laura Petrie, I think, is the name of the character. So I'll probably wrap up soon, but I want to see if I have any other thoughts. Yeah, what I was saying is I went through the episode and it became more kind of tragic and depressing, and I felt more and more empathy for Wanda, which I always have anyway, in the movie incarnation and of course the comic book incarnation, and always been one of my favorite characters. Same with Vision. I went through all that in previous videos, but it does make me sentimental to watch this. It's kind of like 30 years ago, 30, 25 years ago, 35 years ago, whatever. Most of my life, because I first, like I said before, I first drew a picture of the Vision when I was about 4 or 5 years old, crayons, and called him the Avenger, and um, maybe five. And that was a long time ago. I'm not going to say how long because I don't reveal my age, chronological age, but um, it was quite a while, more than a couple of decades ago. And if I if you told me back then there was going to be this live action, living, breathing manifestation of these characters and these stories that meant so much to me as a child and resonated so heavily with me, even to the point where they're more in my subconscious, because I'd kind of quit collecting Marvel in the '90s, and yet when I saw the X-Men movie in the theaters, I cried. I actually gasped when I first saw Wolverine. It was like, wow, this is my childhood. I mean, I wasn't even a big X-Men fan of the new X-Men like all my friends were, but I knew everything about them. I collected them. I just to see them come to life was amazing, and I've had this feeling several times with several characters like Captain America. Chris Evans, he is Captain America, and uh, Charlie Cox is Daredevil. Same with these characters, Elizabeth Olsen and Paul Bettany. They are Wanda and Vision, and I mean, Vision being realized as a live character is amazing. I went through a lot with the Vision as a kid. I was always rooting for that guy. He was always having some kind of problem. Even after him and Wanda got married, they had a brief problem because of this guy Wonder Man, which I may or may not have mentioned in an earlier episode. But they worked it out. Everything was fine until the fucker John Byrne came along. But anyway, curse him. Um, that's kind of my thoughts on the episode. I'm not going to speculate on what's going to happen next. I told you I don't really do that generally. Like I said, I do sometimes speculate when I first see something, and some things I was right about that I've called, but I don't ever announce them, so I know I can't really prove it and then go, aha. But I did, from the beginning of the episode, the seeds are there to where I figured out what was going to happen to the very end. With Wanda, all the revelations. I did not see the Vision being rebuilt coming. So, yes, so this is episode 8. Now, unless they change the schedule at the last minute the way they did several weeks ago and expanded it even more, I guess they just had a lot of footage and they're trying to pace this thing and keep the episodes short and tight. Episode 9, the next episode, will be the last. Unless, like I said, those things happen and they go with 10 episodes. But as of now, it looks like the next episode will be the last one. I don't know if it's going to be 30, 35 minutes ish like the rest of the series. Or not. It may be a longer one. I personally wish it would be like an hour or maybe over an hour. There was a Luke Cage episode one time that was like an hour and 15 minutes. It was like epic, just one episode. I think it was the one where he battles Bushmaster on that bridge. Anyway, I love that storyline. So I've talked enough. I've rattled. I hope my homies who enjoy this kind of stuff got something out of what I'm saying. Maybe agreed with me, disagreed with me. At least understand where I'm coming from. This show means a lot to me for reasons differently than it does to a lot of other people. But I'm happy to see that it means a lot to other people. And I'm happy to see that the premise, the pitch, the gimmick of Wanda with the sitcom, different sitcom every episode, sitcom homage, that's hooked a lot of people by its novelty. And of course, a lot of people came over from the movies, the Avengers movies, and wanted to see what happened to these characters. And I think now they've really, really seen what these characters are about, and they're kind of like addicted. And because of the way it's done, the way it's so thoughtfully written and constructed and beautifully directed and shot. enacted, of course. So I won't go on and on gushing anymore. Like I said, I went into this episode expecting grave disappointment and feeling dubious about where it was going. But by the end of the episode, all that was kind of dissolved away. So, and upon watching it the second time, I definitely think that even more. So, I'll be back at some point next weekend, either Friday if I can, uh, if I'm not too tired after work. This is kind of a stretch doing this one tonight, but I really wanted to do it. But I'll be back like next Friday or Saturday, Sunday. By Sunday, at the latest, with my thoughts on the final episode. And wow. So just wanted to stir up some thought. Let me throw a couple other quick things in. I'm not speculating myself, but some people have been speculating that Doctor Strange will be in the last episode because Wanda's going to be a major character in his next film. My theory, if I were to give one, just it seems pretty likely Doctor Strange will appear in the next episode because Elizabeth Olsen and Paul Bettany have already said in interviews that like a major person from the MCU that they know surprisingly appears on the show. So I'm assuming they mean Benedict Cumberbatch as Doctor Strange. So I could be wrong. I'm hoping Doctor Strange shuts down Agatha's ass and rescues Wanda from her clutches. But Wanda maybe can rescue herself. Who knows? That's it. So I will see you soon on another TV Musing episode about WandaVision, and I'll be throwing out some other videos during the week too, I'm sure. So everybody take care.